Welcome to the Rosenfeld Review, where we're just a bunch of blind men trying to figure out that elephant. Got a couple blind men with me today, Chris Avore and Russ Unger. Hey guys, how are you?
Hey Lou, good to see you. And
hello,
hear from
Lou.
you.
Good to hear me. Thank you. Great to have you guys. We've been on a journey together for I won't say how long, but it's coming to a conclusion. By the time you're listening to this, we expect their new book, Liftoff, Practical Design Leadership to Elevate Your Team, Your Organization, and You, to be on sale, published by Rosenfeld Media, of course. And can't wait for that book to be out. I know you feel the same way. Guys, how did you get to the point in your careers where you found yourselves so immersed in design leadership and design management, or perhaps the lack thereof that you encountered, that you were ready to write a book? How about you first, Chris?
Thanks, Lou. Yeah, the whole story is kind of interesting in that the book that would have been written in 2016 when we first kicked this adventure off compared to today is significantly different, and I'm convinced very much so for the better. When we started, we kind of were coming from a place of, I had just started managing a team at the NASDAQ stock market about 3 years prior, and a lot of the successes there were exclusively just kind of almost like external of the design team. It was getting more influence, it was taking on more projects, it was growing the team. And a lot of my screw ups were with the actual designers themselves, trying to make sure that they were feeling like a part of the ride and that their contributions were making an impact as well and had a clear vision and direction. And so basically, since then, and then when I was working at Envision as basically a traveling kind of almost like a therapist for design leaders who would basically say, these are some of our challenges, Chris. How have you tried to address similar things in the past? That's where we started to see more of an opportunity to talk about design leadership at scale. So we kind of had a very almost narrow focus just from my time at NASDAQ to then being able to have a very much broader reach of what was confronting design organizations from big household name companies all over the place to really start to see more, I guess, breadth, if you will, of where those challenges were, and then to be able to write about those. So that's kind of the biggest difference from where this book would have been if we started in 2016 and just cranked it out, to being able to have a lot wider perspective of what's going on across the industry in a variety of organizations, industries, team sizes, various maturities of the organizations that are trying to build design practices or trying to improve their design practice in their company. It's a huge difference.
Thanks, Chris. Russ, has your path been similar?
Yeah, especially in that part where there was a lot of mistakes made. I think when I started, I very quickly thought every manager I ever had was an idiot. And then I very quickly got to become an idiot myself. And there's something about getting the experience of seeing what your managers have at different levels that you start to understand the pace layers of organizations and how sometimes we need people to do what's right now versus doing what's the right thing long term in order to build out runway. For me, I grew up kind of in consulting environments, and I got lucky and got to work for some really great agencies. I got to spend some time with Happy Cog, which was such an amazing experience, and some of the most amazing folks in my career that I've ever gotten to work with. And then to jump in and work in the enterprise and financial, and then turn and get to have an opportunity to work with the United States federal government at 18F and really being the first person to lead that design team and growing it massively at scale, where it's not to say that there's not design in federal government. There are so many designers in federal government that are doing good work, and at that point in time, they weren't necessarily all aware of each other. And I think at that point in time, I was very naively thinking that if you had done government design, you maybe hadn't done modern design, and really unfair of me, and really a lot for me to learn. And I think that working in an organization where we grew very rapidly from about 70 to or 7 to about 50 was really a great experience, especially in understanding my own personal capacity, and how much I could manage and how much I had to manage. And really what it boils down to is, I think where Chris and I both came from in this book was that we made a lot of mistakes. There are not a lot of opportunities for people to um, be provided frameworks or opportunities to kind of learn into leadership without being thrust into it. I mean, I think it's not a secret that a lot of organizations say, these are our top performers, let's make them managers. And there's not a lot of recognition that those are completely different skill sets.
So I'm getting the sense that maybe a better title for this book would have been "Mistakes Were Made: An Idiot's Guide to Being a Better Idiot." But
Thanks, Lou.
yeah, we went with a more we went with a more traditional title. It's a good one. But I get the sense that people listening who are also kind of finding themselves in these difficult positions of leadership and management that they may not have anticipated. What is the tipping point that people are encountering? Or why is this happening? Is it that there are just more designers and researchers and other folks in the creative space than there were before that need to be managed, or is it more along the lines of the challenges that individual teams are facing are being so, kind of turbocharged by issues of complexity and scale that they need kind of more robust management, or is it both?
I think there's a mix of all of that. One of the things that I think has happened, and is no surprise to all of us too, is that design stopped being the differentiator for great companies, and it started being the requirement. Everybody had to have designers. And so we saw a lot of organizations that were design firms go in-house. Adaptive Path to Capital One is certainly a good example. And we saw design teams grow and grow and grow. And so when there's a little bit of surprise that we seem to be growing top heavy or having a lot of design leadership roles opening up, I don't think it's as surprising, since we've kind of grown our presence in the industry or in the field in general. So I think it's at least a big part of that. Yeah, at least it's a big part of that. I think that's a starting point. I know Chris has much more to add here.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think I think that Russ is definitely onto something there. I think part of it, Lou, and you were speaking of this a little bit, is that the expectations have changed. I think that there's much more of a groundswell of expectations heaped on the product development practice, if not exclusively the design practice. And so, some of these companies know that they need to have better product development practices. They know that they need to have better design, but they don't always necessarily know what it takes to get that. And so now they're hoping that their design leadership can get that. In other instances, it's when they've pumped in more money and resources to those teams, and then they're starting to say that, wow, that doesn't just fix the problem. Kristen Skinner and Peter Merholtz have said more than once that the design leader of a 5-person team sometimes isn't necessarily the best leader and manager for a 25-person design team at the same organization. And I think that, and oftentimes it's because that person may not have either the skill sets to succeed at that level along with managing the growth, or that's just not their bag, right? That's just not something that they want to do. So I think that that's part of the reason we're seeing these types of changes, because expectations are changing externally, from outside of the design team itself, but then they're also changing internally, where designers aren't necessarily comfortable with just being, pixel pushers. They're not comfortable being downstream, where they don't have any opportunity to affect business strategy. They're reading a lot of the same articles that folks like us read, and they're starting to recognize that there's probably a better way, whether that's at their current job or if they have to leave to find somewhere else to get that.
So it's interesting. obviously, um, I'm very interested in design operations as a concept, and we have a conference on that, and that seems to kind of go hand in hand with a lot of the things you guys were just talking about. But I was talking with Kate Towsey earlier this week, of Research Ops fame, and we kind of kept bandying about the term professionalization. And sometimes I wonder if that's really kind of what you're talking about here, even for those people who are leading or managing the small team, who are new to this. Is a certain kind of belief that wasn't in place before, that this is a thing of, it's a real thing. This role is a real role. It's not necessarily only because people, kind of accidentally find their way there. It should have a formal job description and clear responsibilities, but that it's actually going beyond that. It's becoming professionalized. I'm not even sure I know what professionalized means in this context, but I wonder if that term resonates with you guys.
It does for me to a number of extents. I think it's interesting that comes from some of that operationalization background there, right? That because in some cases you have to have I think that it's almost like a gratuitous cycle there. You can't have one without the other shortly coming before or after it. Because you could operationalize something that doesn't necessarily have the influence or the you could almost say notoriety of the team within the broader organization. You can run a great ship but how great is it if nobody knows what's going on there? If you can, if you have a great team in place that knows what they're working on and how that work gets done and at that right cadence that's right for the rest of the product development team. But if the broader organization isn't aware of it, if they're not necessarily seeing or aware of the value, then oftentimes it's like that tree falling in a forest. I think that the professionalization probably captures both elements. It's making sure that you've got a fine-tuned ship running while also making sure that everyone understands the value, benefit, and ultimately influence of that ship that's running so well.
It's interesting too. There's other parts of this where I think when you start to talk about things that we talk about in the book, like team charters, and you start to formalize what your organizational practices and norms are and share those with your organization, other parts of the organization notice and look and they say, they're doing something, why don't we have this? Or we should have this, and start to borrow from some of those good practices. It's the same as even writing performance profiles, which if you've heard of Lou Adler, then performance profiles are really what he talks about as job descriptions. And when you do performance profiles and you can kind of workshop those as a team, as people who come together, who are doing the jobs themselves and understand the roles implicitly and know what success looks like, instead of, I think, as I like to say, people who go to LinkedIn and find a content strategist role, copy paste it, and hope that they found all of those previous company names removed. Very much, if anybody watches The Office, you'll know the threat level midnight where Dwight found out his name was misspelled Dwiggett while he was reading it. Anyway, dumb jokes aside here, this might not make it off the cutting room floor.
Oh no, we're keeping it, Russ.
Well, the two people who get that reference and my daughter will very much appreciate it.
I hope you're enjoying the podcast. If you want more, not only do we have a whole bunch of podcasts in our archive, but we have something that's very current, very alive, and very engaging for groups, and that is our communities. Rosenfeld Media runs a variety of communities that meet on a monthly basis for video conferences on a variety of topics near and dear to UX people, ranging from an enterprise experience to advancing research to design and research operations. I want to encourage you to join one of our communities. Again, it is free by going to rosenfeldmedia.com/communities. Not only will you get a monthly video conference that you can listen in on and participate in, ask questions and so forth, we'll give you access to the recordings. And for some of those communities, we're talking about dozens of recordings with really interesting presenters and facilitators. You'll also get a newsletter. You'll get access to an advice columnist. Yes, we actually are providing advice columnists for each community. And finally, if you're interested in our conferences, our communities correspond to our conferences. So you will be the first to know when programs go live, when tickets go on sale, and by the way, most of our conferences sell out, and other good things about our conferences, such as when the scholarship applications open up. So go to rosenfeldmedia.com/communities. You're going to find something that's free, something that's interesting, and it's a great opportunity to find your tribe as well. We'll see you there. You mentioned Lou Adler, and I know a little bit about his perspective. Jared Spool's been a real proponent, and obviously he's had influence here. Who else? What are the influences you guys have found to be really valuable from the traditional management literature, the I don't know, stuff you might have picked up in Harvard Business Review, or and then I wonder, also, are there any really strong perspectives that have influenced your writing from the design leadership and management subgenre?
So one of my favorite books was written by Noah Bushnell, and it's called Finding the Next Steve Jobs. And obvious kind of link bait titles aside, it talks a lot about how Atari did a lot of their management and how they handled innovation, separating it from the day-to-day. And there's a lot of really good stuff that I've taken from that that really has kind of helped frame and shape doing things that allow people to be successful. I think that was a really good starting point for me, at least from outside of the industry. Chris is probably more the Harvard Business Review side.
You're just saying that because I have more suits than you.
In pastel and seersucker, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that to somewhat of your point about folks that write on this stuff and have been talking about this stuff. I think that I absolutely couldn't refrain from re-mentioning again, Kristen Skinner's work and Peter's. But then also, Laura Hogan's work in resilient design management or resilient management. I always get that mixed up because that was one of my talks back in the day. But moving away from that, from just the design specific material, the Donnella Meadows Thinking in Systems, I think is tremendously influential because that's where you start to see that interconnectedness in those ecosystems in which we operate, and to see the influences and the second and third order impacts of some of the decisions that we make, whether we understand those consequences or correlations or not. And then from the Harvard business side, I regularly cite Amy Edmondson, a lot of her work on psychological safety. It's gone a long way in influencing, the way I have written in the book about, changing up inclusion, particularly when I have screwed that up in my own management practices in the past, stuff like that. So there's absolutely some great folks talking about a lot of this, and that's why we're excited about some of the folks who have contributed to the book. Russ and I were pretty intentional of asking a pretty diverse body of contributors to share their thoughts on design management in their own experiences in their own careers, as they have seen changes from their variety of perspectives and whatnot, that I think are going to make the book stand out. So it's not just, yet another book by two white dudes coming from a position of power talking about design management. I think that we really try to surface a lot of voices that in some cases are very well known, and then in other cases are probably going to be new to a lot of people, which I think is exactly what we need for a design management and design leadership book.
And I'm really glad you guys did that. And that is something we're seeing more and more of in not only our books, but conference programs and the industry as a whole. Mm-hmm. And it's a welcome change. Go ahead, Russ.
Sorry about that. Yeah, if I may throw a couple more out there, I think for starters, when you look at Kristen and Peter's book, which is Design Org for Design Orgs.
Org Design for Design Orgs, yeah.
What I say, something, yes.
Something like
designers designing orgs for orgs that need design in organizations. Right, that's like my favorite new movie coming out is For Thor, More Thor. Um, I'd be I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Maggie Sue Wagner. She used to be the chief of staff at Zappos, and understanding what somebody's role looks like, who is touching parts of every part of the organization, is really insightful, especially when you're starting to look at just the slice that seems to be design. And then, kind of for me, more broadly, I looked at the work of General Stan McChrystal, and way back in the early parts of my design career, when I met Matthew Milan, he turned me on to John Boyd and OODA loops, which is observe, orient, decide, and act, and understanding how fighter pilots looked at things. Which really feels like I've mentioned too much aggression in this, and that wasn't the intent. It was just the understanding of the principles that really kind of shaped even some of the design, I think, leadership thinking and style that at least I've tried to take as an approach.
Well, you guys are bringing together lots of different thinkers, different perspectives. You are bringing in a pretty diverse set of experiences that just the two of you have managed to pull together over the course of your careers. What I wonder before we wrap up, if you could, give a couple choice pieces of advice that you might cover in more depth in the book, both for people new to design leadership and management, and maybe to people who've been at it a while and need to grow as their challenges grow.
Words have gravity, especially when your role changes. What could have been a light joke to the buddy who sits next to you or down the hall has a lot more gravity when your role changes. I think the more elevated you become, the more serious people can take the things that you say, where it's not at all cool to make a joke about having the ability to fire somebody. And it's also the one advice that I could really give, maybe two pieces, would be approve time off requests as quickly as possible. Because people are making life decisions and this impacts them. And the other one is never tell somebody, hey, we need to talk, without giving them some context. Because if there's anything more terrifying and that will cause you to lose more sleep, it's a supervisor saying to you at 5 o'clock, hey, can we talk first thing in the morning? That's just shitty. So if you can give context to that so people can, sleep and get on with their lives, or let them know, hey, just need to chat, nothing serious. Those are really small steps into making people more comfortable in their existence. And I think then you can kind of start to learn how to, take your next steps up to make worlds easier for other people. I always try to think of, how do I reduce burden for the other folks that I work with? Not always successful, always trying to do that though.
How about you, Chris?
Yeah, I think I can probably take Russ's kind of suggestion there, and actually put a foundation under that of, just really trying to develop a stronger, more accurate sense of self-awareness. Have that perspective of where you are in your organization. This kind of goes back to that, thinking in systems type of approach, of where the things that you do and the things that you say and the behavior that you exhibit are going to have impacts, and not all the time that intent is the same as what or the impact is not necessarily what your intent was in the first place. So having that self-awareness of being like, am I speaking on the circuit too much versus actually doing work? Does my team understand like what my own contributions are to the broader mission? Am I communicating enough at the right level with these folks? And up, does the management fully understand the value that the design team is producing? All comes down to that self-awareness of knowing where you are in your team, in your organization, in your position of influence in that company. And I think that's a pretty common steel thread through all of Russ's chapters and my own chapters, is to say, trying to better understand where you are with a better focus, so that you can make the changes that you actually want to make, not necessarily the changes that end up happening because you didn't have that self-awareness to see that possibly negative consequence.
Well, that's great and highly practical advice from Chris Avore and Russ Unger, who are writing a book for Rosenfeld Media. Liftoff: Practical Design Leadership to Elevate Your Team, Your Organization, and You. Guys, before we sign off, I always like to ask if there is someone or something you think our listeners should know about.
I'll go first. So again, part of the advantage to writing this book has been the number of different people that we get to, or at least in my situation, that I've been able to work with for contributions and for them to be able to, add their thoughts and perspectives to the book. And so this may sound like a Rosenfeld Media home team shill, but Jackie Fry is doing some incredible work. She's going to be speaking at the Design Ops Conference, and she has her own book coming out, also to be published by Rosenfeld Media. I hope hers is released far sooner than it took us.
Hope
she's
so.
doing some. It doesn't take much. Let's all agree there. Like, the bar is set pretty low to beat an Avore Unger production here.
Just have a schedule and stick to it. That's all it takes.
Yeah, that's all it is. Yeah. So I think an entire Olympiad has gone by, election cycles, the whole nine. But no, she's been doing some cool stuff. She was, in the conversation or two that I've had with her, like, mind blowing stuff at the level that she's practicing, the operationalization of design, to your point, the professionalization of design. So I think it'll be great to see more of her thoughts be more widely shared.
Excellent. How about you, Russ?
I think that I don't think I would have done anything anywhere near as well as I've done it in the past handful of years if it wouldn't have been for some pretty brilliantly strong people. Jennifer Tress was somebody I worked with at 18F, and she headed up talent operations. And through working with her, really changed my understanding of what hiring processes look like and how to communicate to people, and frankly, be very human about a process that isn't all that human. And I was blessed to be able to work with Cara DeFrias, who had been a Presidential Innovation Fellow and also just really shaped the way the organization worked, and has brought a lot of really great stuff, both to federal government and to the design space. And finally, Emily Barnes was somebody that I got to work with at 18F2, and since she kind of graduated out and found a new role at Capital One, she's done nothing but skyrocket. And these are folks, Emily Barnes, Jennifer Tress, Cara DeFrias, that you should be following, watching. Frankly, they should be writing books themselves, and just helping us all become better at this stuff. They're fantastic.
Yeah, duly noted.
Plus one. Yeah, I would even plus one just because it's a positive contribution there. Like, I think the folks who were our tech reviewers, which I was kind of laughed at, more peer reviewers, I think were all just really awesome folks who came with a lot of great perspectives. Like, between Emily Campbell, a former colleague at Envision of mine, Nicole Maynard and at cars.com, Emily Barnes at Capital One, she was great. Like, these are all Amy Jimenez, Marquez, have all just been really, really great perspectives that we would not have. It's great to see them react to some of our perspectives to make sure that we're communicating exactly what we want, and they're able to add to their own contributions as well.
Well, and thank you guys for your contributions and for the generosity of recognizing so many other people. Chris Avore, Russ Unger, their book, Liftoff, Practical Design Leadership to Elevate Your Team, Your Organization, and You, from Rosenfeld Media. Please pick up a copy. Thanks, guys. Thanks for joining us on the Rosenfeld Review.
Thank you, and thanks to Marta, our heavy lifting reviewer, because we would be nowhere without her.
Perfect. Thanks, folks.
All right. Thanks for listening to the Rosenfeld Review, brought to you by Rosenfeld Media. If you like our show, please subscribe and review it on iTunes, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast platform. I'd love it if you tell a friend to have a listen. And please check out our website for over 100 podcasts with other interesting people. You'll find them all at rosenfeldreview.com.